too many startups that have raised money for a niche AI agent, right? It reminds me in some ways, I lived here long enough of the dot-com boom. But of course, as with every bubble I have experienced, the word on the street is always, this time it's different. But at the end of the day, they do burst. The cultures between Taiwan and the United States or Germany are fundamentally different in every aspect from a communication level. And then, of course, English is the second language that adds complication. But it's often what you intend to say and say. You don't mean to say it that way. It's just being received by the other party, just misunderstood. And then that can lead to problems. Most international startups I see are failing when they come from other countries. They just look at their own country. Oh, there's no competitor in Europe, so let's go to America. But why don't you just actually understand who are your top two customers in America, and why would they want to buy my product versus the local US competitors?
Hey, welcome, Volker, to my startup podcast interview show. It's a pleasure to have you on.
Brandon, thanks for having me. My pleasure. Good afternoon. Greetings from San Francisco.
Yeah, and I'm definitely looking forward to learning all about your background and what it is that you're working on. I know that you helped or you co-founded a deep tech VC, which I'm always very fascinated by the deep tech space, really these tough technical problems. But before we jump into that, do you mind just telling me about your background? What led you into this space? What experiences did you have leading up to this?
Yeah, sure. So as you can probably tell from my accent and name, I was born in Germany. I became a US citizen a while ago. I moved to California, to San Francisco in 1996, and I had studied financial law, and I worked in business development and research in tech companies in the Bay Area. Actually, AT&T, IDG, which is a media research tech company, and Google. And then I went to an investment bank. And that really got me on the startup bandwagon. That was in 2006, a very long time ago. And then around the financial crisis, when the financial crisis hit in 2008 or 9, I traveled for a year and decided that I don't want to go and work back in the big corporate world for big corporate. And I wanted to use my network and my experiences that I had gathered in the 12 years or so in San Francisco, and set up a company in Asia. And so I spent some time traveling that year, and I looked at 3 cities: Shanghai, Taipei, and Singapore. And in the end, the pendulum swung for Taipei. And that's why I started my first company called Yushan Ventures. And we helped establish the startup ecosystem. And then I took that company on a global scale, where we had a distributed team in different countries and provided technology scouting services and startup scouting services and some research for global brands, primarily in the car industry, companies like Audi, for example. And then 2019, I went back to Taiwan and started Mosaic Venture Lab, which has been an accelerator and more recently a VC fund, as you mentioned. And we initially were focused on the automotive industry, but we have now expanded, of course, besides artificial intelligence, we're focused on healthcare and semiconductor industry, which is native to Taiwan. And I spent my time in San Francisco and in Taipei.
Well, sounds like a fascinating journey. You've been all over the place in many different industries, and now we're in a very exciting industry. You mentioned Taiwan and semiconductors. Of course, that's playing into a lot of things, not just in industry and AI, but also politically. So you're really at the epicenter of a lot of things that are going on right now. So I'm looking forward to finding out more about that. So let me just start off with how did this venture in Taiwan develop later on into venture cap? Did you started off building a community, and then did that turn into a VC firm, or was it more like a separate venture that you started to start the VC firm?
It's a great question, and it's been an evolution. Actually, funny enough, in 2011, when we started the company Yushan Ventures, it had the name Ventures already in the title, and we made angel investments, a number of angel investments in Taipei. at the time, and it was too early. So the focus was really more on building an ecosystem, which is one of the expertises that I really enjoy. And we got a lot of visibility. We brought what nobody knows any longer, a startup weekend to Taiwan, and the government took notice. And then we built for the Asia Pacific Economic APAC Corporation, we built an accelerator platform that took me to almost all of the 20 member economies of APAC, from Peru to Singapore to Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, a lot of countries. Where we just literally use the government resources to then bring in startups from the different APAC economies and help them raise money or connect with corporations. So that was quite groundbreaking at the time for APAC and also for the government in Taiwan. And then over the years that has changed. Then I had a colleague in Taipei join me. He's a VC. And his vision was from day one, he joined in 2022 to actually raise a fund and to invest in startups primarily, in addition to providing tech scouting, consulting services, research services.
Okay, so it started off as sort of getting funding from the government's part of APAC. They were actually looking to build up their venture communities. And then what was your proposition? That you would bring that to broader markets, or you would offer some kind of just connections to the ecosystem?
That's actually a good question. And I noticed that the governments obviously have deep pockets, and APAC it's not an association, I guess I call it corporation. It's been around for a long time. I had very little experience with startups, and they wanted to get experience. So they needed somebody from the industry, and they provided the funding, the resources, and I invited speakers from literally all over the world, and we flew them to the different destinations wherever that accelerator platform took place. And that started in 2012. It was quite early, actually. And then it ran all the way through 2018. And due to some political challenges between Taiwan and China, it actually was discontinued. But that's a different story.
Well, what would you say are the most promising types of companies, deep technologies that you're looking at? And how do you even evaluate something like that? It always seems to me like it'd be very tough to evaluate. You have this company burrowing a deep tunnel into some technology that maybe only they understand fully. How do you evaluate that this is a good deep tech company to invest in?
It depends on the stage and on the location, right? So investing in a Taiwanese startup that's founded by Taiwanese founders is quite different from investing in a Silicon Valley startup. And it starts right with the cap table. In Taiwan, you're hardly going to find any employees on the cap table. So ESOPs pretty much are non-existent. And the reason being is there has been no big success in recent history that there have been, like the Google type of exit, where 10,000s of people turn into overnight millionaires when a company goes public. In Taiwan, there's a very vibrant IPO landscape, but that's also its problem at the same time, because it's very easy for startups, even without revenues, to go public, depending the board you pick. And that means the valuations never get to the unicorn, or very rarely get to the unicorn level. And companies go public, like for a lot less. And along the way, not as many, of the shareholders make money. So it's pretty much exclusive to the investor, the cap table, and the founders of the company in Taiwan. So that's obviously a big difference right there. And then cultural considerations. But when I say it depends on the stage, right, if it's a pre-seed investment, yes, we want to see revenue predictions, of course, but we all know they're not going to play out the way it's being predicted. But they need to be there. If it's is the sweet spot for Taiwan VCs, not for our fund, but for the traditional incumbent, and there are tons of them, Taiwanese VC firms, CVC firms, they look at pre-IPO, right? They want to invest, and then maximum a year later, the company should go public in Taiwan. And so at that stage, the considerations are, of course, more on the financial side, where, in the early stage, we're looking more at the team and the market, right? How competitive is the product? And that, gets me to your other question: what is hot these days? Here,
Right.
being in San Francisco and attending lots of events, AI events, right? We can't escape the AI agent term, and they're not going away. But there are too many startups that have raised money for a niche AI agent, right? It reminds me in some ways, I lived here long enough, of the dot-com boom. But of course, as with every bubble I have experienced, the word on the street is always, this time it's different. But at the end of the day, they do burst. And I think we even had Sam Altman go on record and say we are living in an AI bubble territory.
I think I heard that, yeah.
For whatever purposes, he said that. If he meant it or not, I don't know. But so, right, stay away from AI agents. We like hardware investments, hardware software investments. For recently, we invested in a medical device startup. They're scanning your artery with an iPhone camera to detect potential stroke risk and then treat you afterwards. They're in clinical trials in Taiwan at the moment, and eventually we'll bring them to the United States. So we like medical devices. We have invested in just IC Design House, semiconductor plays, which makes a lot of sense for Taiwan. And on the automotive side, which is one of our focuses, we like the user experience for the cabin, right? Whatever happens in the cabin of the car, would never invest in an electric vehicle startup, right? Unless it was Tesla, most of them, Rivian is one of the rare examples of EV startups that have gotten bigger. But that's a tough one. So I would not invest in the entire vehicle, but components / entertainment and all the elements that drive the user experience, micro LEDs, which is another topic native to Taiwan, that enhance and help cars to differentiate from their competitors and make the end user happier.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating. It's already a different approach than I would have thought for investing, and that's interesting to see a VC perspective on agents. Since I happen to be working on an agent right now, so I hope to avoid the pitfalls of the bubble. But no, that's it's good to hear it from you, so that I'm warned of that. But yeah, so you mentioned that device that can scan your neck, and I'm thinking about the process that you said before about how it's all about the timing, the stage that the startup is in for when to invest to them. So for a company like that, is the way that you would go about investing that you would just see, okay, they have a brilliant team, they have people good in the medical niche that know how effective this scanner is, and on the technical side, and compare that to the other players in the market. And if they're ready to IPO, then that seems like a good investment relative, or since they're competitive relative to their competition, that's how that would play out.
It plays out that way, but we run an accelerator program in Taiwan where we bring international startups to Taiwan and work with Taiwanese startups to go to Europe, Germany in particular, where I'm from originally, and the United States as well. But the main focus there is actually Europe. So in this case, right, there's always a lot of nuances to investing in a startup. In this case, because we are running an accelerator program in Taiwan, the startup was in our accelerator. And we have taken a board seat, and my co-founder actually has taken an interim CFO role, which also helps Johnny. So we know the startup really, really well, and have literally because we are very connected with, for example, Taipei Medical University Hospital for clinical trials. So we made a lot of introductions, and the startup also has the founding members from universities. So it's a very deep tech, deep medical startup in that sense. And the space made sense, but it's been risky. Like when you invest in biotech, 80% of clinical trials don't make it, right? It's just a very, very high failure rate. But in this case, we knew some of the right people, and it just made sense, and just closed a round, and the A round, and moving forward.
Yeah, so you're saying that you guys are really, I mean, not only plugged into the ecosystem where you can see, they're working with this university medical center, all these brilliant people, but also you're creating the accelerator and bringing up startups through your own ecosystem. Is that a big key to successful venture cap? Creating your own accelerator? Yeah.
For the early stage, it helps a lot, right? To work with teams versus just meeting them at a meetup and then writing a check, unless the tech is just so differentiated, right? So getting to know people always helps for every purpose in life, in relationships, right? Hiring people and also investing in companies. The more time you can spend, if you have the luxury of being able to spend time, the better. But in this case, it was also. Or in general, we have industry experts. When we invest in semiconductor, we have a colleague named Todd Lin. He is like one of the cornerstones of the semiconductor ecosystem in Taiwan these days. He actually came out of retirement to work with us. So when we work with semiconductor IC design startups, we always bring in Todd and the expertise, right? So I think it's important that you not only conduct your team due diligence, can the team execute, is the product competitive and all of that, product market fit, but in addition, the financials, in addition, the technical element, right? In deep tech, now it's called hard tech, right? San Francisco has pivoted from deep tech to hard tech, which is great. It brings Taiwan even much more so to the table. Than in the past. But it's important to have a network of engineers. And I'm not going to mention, but it's one of the top Silicon Valley VC firms. Their Singapore office reached out to us a while ago, and they were interested in chiplets. And to my surprise, they were looking to pay somebody to get more access to the Taiwan ecosystem. And more importantly, they didn't have the internal capabilities to conduct due diligence on chiplets. Again, this being a Silicon Valley fund, one of the tier one funds that everybody knows around the world.
Sorry, do you mind explaining what is a chiplet?
That's just a part of the ICT industry, a new semiconductor approach that's been around for the last couple of years. But the story here is really that it's so important, and even tier one VC firms don't have the coverage of engineers for every aspect of that what they're looking to invest in potentially. So that was really a big surprise for me. That was a lacking capability of one of the tier one funds globally.
And so you mentioned you have it's good to have an expert that really knows the domain knowledge. Is there anyone else that when you're looking at companies to invest in, when you're doing your market research, who's on the venture cap team, or who you collaborating with, or you're pulling in besides the domain expert, of course, the investor? Is there anyone else that comes into play here?
Yeah, the fund is actually it's one LP, and it's an evergreen. It's from a Taiwan FSP technology. They're in the power supply space. So we have 3 seats on the IC. I'm one of the IC members, and then from the corporate side, there are also IC members. And the beautiful arrangement there is if you work with an LP that has thousands of engineers, you can always plug into those resources. But our network in Taiwan is pretty solid. We're also running programs to bring Taiwanese startups and train them to CES, which I'm working on at the moment, and to VivaTech in Europe. And so for that purpose, I have a number of 15 US mentors and 15 European mentors that very closely engage with not only our startups, but also startups in Taiwan. And so there's always, like somebody on standby to reach out to if we need to conduct due diligence.
Got it. And speaking of mentors, did you have a mentor bring you into the East Asia market? How did you first tap into that? How did that start off? Did you have to make friends there first, or
I wish I had. Yeah, that's crazy me. I got on a plane in 1996 when I was finishing up my law studies, my undergraduate degree in Germany, and I bought a one-way ticket to San Francisco. And I walked through the tallest office buildings. I wanted to work in a high-rise building, and with my resume in my hand, there was no LinkedIn. And I was looking for an internship. I had started a consulting company with a guy from China, a student from China in Germany.
Nice.
I used that as a talking point, and I was looking for international trade, something along those lines in 1996. I had no mentor. I just, did it on my own, and I was lucky through a number of coincidences to land an internship, and then, that got me got me hooked here in the Bay Area, and I stayed through the dot-com boom and bust, the real estate boom and bust, and a couple of other bubbles right along the way. During the pandemic, I was in Taiwan. And same for Asia. I got on a plane, traveled for 1 year, not only to Asia. And then I had local people that I met. Actually, one German gentleman, a blogger, he didn't speak Chinese, and he said, "I did it, you can do it." So I had people that encouraged me. A partner from Sequoia at the time, Mark Dempster, he's not there anymore. I sent him a deal in 2011 or 2012. It was a French startup in Taiwan, and he was really interested. And we set up calls with Google M&A department, and he goes like, "You may have tapped into an untapped opportunity." And so that coming from Sequoia sort of stuck with me until today. And at the time, until the pandemic, I also had an office in Thailand at one point. So when I travel and I tell people on the plane or wherever I'm from, or I have a business in Taiwan, they always like, "Thailand." So people did not know that Taiwan exists unless you're really in the chip industry. And that's changed, right? Due to geopolitical issues and the semiconductor industry, right? The crisis during the pandemic, automotive couldn't get cars produced any longer because they didn't have the chips that TSMC taped out, and now the entire AI boom. So yeah, that's Taiwan for you. But mentors, I do have a number of mentors, of course, very, very important. Not all of them are older than I am, but one of them is Bruce Bateman, so it's been very, very important. It's a key. Everybody should have a mentor if you want to grow, right? That's very important.
Yeah. No, it really does save you. I mean, if someone has been down that path before and they've hit all the pitfalls, then they can really save you from hitting those pitfalls and save you a lot of time. So definitely important. And so you mentioned some of the political tensions or rumblings going on about Taiwan. So there's the U.S. is trying to, or is heavily dependent on Taiwan for TSMC's fabrication of chips. Of course, we get most of our chips from there, so is the rest of the world. And so we're trying to diversify, create our own chips at home. And then also you have China racing to create their own chips. And so a lot of competition and regulation being put down by the U.S. to limit chips being provided to China. Is this affecting the startup, the venture community as well, or is it staying contained to the giant that is TSMC?
Couple of things. It is affecting the startup community, of course. It is not easy it's an island, 23 million people, like Canada, like Australia, about the same population size. It's not easy for the locals, if it's a local team, to actually leave the island. Cultural barriers, distance, language barriers, right? But especially cultural barriers. So that's makes it a little more challenging for startups. But now they obviously feel the urgency. When I got there first in 2011, it was all about China. And now, obviously, and that was the exit path that startups had in their mind. Very few succeeded, by the way, even when things were friendlier between those two parties, mainland and the island being Taiwan. Very few startups succeeded. I mean, I remember going to Microsoft's venture accelerator. I forgot what it was called in Beijing, and seeing some Taiwanese startups are like, "Oh, you're here now." A couple of years later, right? They just failed. China is not easy for even Chinese startups. It's not easy. Very competitive. So now that path has closed completely, 100% shut down. You can raise money in any way in Taiwan from government resources, and the government is in a lot of funds if you have any Chinese money on the cap table, mainland Chinese money on the cap table, for example. So the startups don't have the China path anymore. That is out of the window. So they look at Europe, and US is one market, right? So they look at the United States, of course, much more so than before, but the difficulties remain the same. So you see that as a fallout of the political issues. But, it's also an opportunity. Foreign direct investment into mainland has gone down probably in single digits from maybe it was 60-80% 10 years ago to now diversified in Europe. And of course, traditionally in the United States. And I'm talking about big corporates now. Startups tend not to write big checks from a foreign direct investment perspective, aside from establishing offices and raising money in other countries.
No, that's really interesting. I mean, so I just have a question back to about startups from Taiwan failing when they take the China route. So why was that to begin with? Why was it so tough? I've heard things about the Chinese stock market doesn't really perform the same way that the U.S. stock market does, which tends to always be biased towards growth. Is it related to that, or yeah? What's the deal there?
No, it's the market. The market is its own beast, and it's also the dialect in Shanghai is different. It's a different language, even it's Mandarin, than in Beijing. The culture is different. The local culture, the go-to-market strategies have to be adjusted. I mean, a city like the size of Shanghai is like, I don't know, 20, 30 million people, like Tokyo, right?
Yeah.
It's more people live in Shanghai than on the entire island of Taiwan. Yeah. And so it's quite.
That's a good way to put it.
Right. And so you have then very, very hardworking local startups that, have grown up in their local market, in their local cities. And then if you come as a foreigner and you don't have something highly differentiated and you don't bring local Chinese people on the team, it's going to be impossible to survive in mainland China. And I think that was a trap for Taiwan. They thought, oh, we are sort of like one language, one culture. But it turns out it's not that easy.
So there's so many variables here. Of course, we mentioned the geopolitical ones, as you just mentioned, cultural differences, or just having that domain knowledge of living in China versus living in Taiwan. So a lot of factors here. Do you have a clear vision for your company, your VC firm for what direction things will go as you continue to invest in the future?
Yes, like every VC, right? Raise more money.
Right.
VCs have two things in mind: the next LP, the next fund, and then obviously finding good deal flow, right? So that's the same for us. We wish to invest more in healthcare and more in the semiconductor industry. But we're also working, aside from that, and that's what I work on a lot, is to raise awareness for foreign companies, startups, as an R&D platform, Taiwan, but also for large multinational corporations that are not just looking at TSMC, but that actually want to conduct research on microelectronics, for example, micro LEDs, medical devices, and other sectors where Taiwan is really, really strong. The intersection of software and hardware, speaking of robotics, right, which is a huge, huge forthcoming trend and clearly not a bubble. And then you have a whole drone element added to it when we talk about hard tech and all the military spending around the world. So there's a lot of opportunities that Taiwan can help, where I think international companies in the US, it's actually much better known West Coast, because a lot of Taiwanese people living at the West Coast, but in Europe, not so many. So the divide is quite significant between Europe and Taiwan, Europe and Asia still. The level of sophistication and understanding of the average citizen, is typically like, oh, I've been to a Thai restaurant in Europe, right? So that's the reality, actually, and so that's a big opportunity. And we seek to work more. We work with Continental right now, for example. That's a big German. They have a couple of 100,000 employees, tier one automotive supplier, and we were helping them with R&D in Taiwan. And we want to do more of that. So and then obviously those connections can also help our investments in startups to then thrive. And they're going to bring a German startup to Taiwan to complete some of the R&D cycle that we're going to manage for them, for example. So so it's not just investment in startups, but we're also looking at in general to utilize Taiwan's strengths that are often not as known to the general public, to the business world, depending on what industry you work in, of course.
Right. And so, would you say, you mentioned German companies working with Taiwan, using their unique advantages? Do you feel there's a unique advantage of being cross-border between countries like that in and of itself? Is there something that having that, creating that bridge, and I know this is something that you've worked a lot with. Does that create an advantage for startup companies?
It does, and also for the corporates. But for especially for German companies, they usually only have sales. There are several hundred, 200 or 300 German companies operating in Taiwan. They usually don't have anything but sales going on in Taiwan, sales teams. And that's a huge missed opportunity. And the reason being is the proximity and strong affiliation of Germany and China, mainland China. And so when you discuss innovation, which is very strategic, with German companies, that is typically, when it comes to the topic of Asia slash Greater China, that typically goes from the German headquarter right to mainland China, and then it's sort of the conversation stops there, and then Taiwan is an afterthought. So there needs to be a lot more education that needs to be done for German companies and startups as well to actually explain Taiwan's R&D capabilities, which are stunning, and in these areas I mentioned, and often unknown. And so, yes, it's a big missed opportunity. And that's why I actually established Mosaic Venture Lab in 2018 or 2019 before the pandemic. But then things got a little derailed, and the company Mosaic became a lot more local in Taiwan, as I had initially intended. But as you know, you pivot, right? That's
Sure.
part of the startup game
Startup way.
as you move through the cycles.
Yeah, so one of the most important things when you're starting a company is to have domain knowledge in some certain areas, some niche, so that you have a competitive advantage. And like you mentioned,
Yeah.
Taiwan has maybe the most valuable niche domain knowledge in the semiconductor industry that is that you could have. And so, yeah, you would think that there would be a huge opportunity of just breaking off from there if you have that expertise and starting your own company that builds something adjacent to that industry that either helps that industry or branches off from it. So yeah, it seems like there's a lot of opportunity there.
It is. For example, we work with a Korean IC design house. They've just recently closed 250 million, and they were tossed between Samsung and TSMC. And our colleague Todd, he was actually able to help a lot. And they had a customer in Korea, which is awesome for a chip startup, right? To have a customer already, but that chip needed to go in servers. And where are those servers made? Not in Korea, not in mainland China. They're made in Taiwan. So there was only one place for them to go. And that's where we helped, right, to get them in touch with the big server players. I'm not going to mention the name of the company right now, but it's like the Pegatrons of the world, and the Wistrons of the world. And these are the hidden resources. When I go to attend trade shows in Germany and I talk to German IC design startups, right, they think of Global Foundry, Intel, what have you, or TSMC for highly specialized chips, but they don't realize that actually Taiwan is the place where they can turn their products into reality by integrating in the supply chain, right? And that supply chain sits in Taiwan and nowhere else like this on the planet. It has to be the right startup. It doesn't make sense for every startup to go to Taiwan. But for some of these European startups, less in the US, there's more knowledge, as I mentioned earlier. But for the European startups, it's a huge missed opportunity that they just simply don't understand Asia and don't think about it. Or maybe they think about Japan or mainland China, and then the rest is sort of an afterthought, or Singapore to go raise money.
Yeah, I think it's definitely clear that there's a lot of value in East Asia. Of course, a lot of developing markets, plus also highly developed markets. That combination.
Yeah.
So I'm sure a lot of great room for collaboration there between the two. But what would you say? I mean, so someone that wants to come in, from what you've seen firsthand, what are the biggest challenges that they would face, or that you've seen that you faced that someone else might encounter?
Culture. I've been in and out of Taiwan for 15 years, and I can tell you some of the quarrels my co-founder and I have had, especially when he joined in 2021, 2022, were not necessary, but they were simply purely based on cultural differences that at the time we both weren't aware of. And it's still resurfacing until today at times. It's gotten better as we get to know each other better, but the cultures between Taiwan and and the United States or Germany are fundamentally different in every aspect from a communication level. And then, of course, English is the second language that adds complication. But it's often what you intend to say and say. You don't mean to say it that way. It's just being received by the other party, just misunderstood. And then that can lead to problems. I think communication between, for example, German companies, German corporates are not known for speed. If you send an email to a German corporate, you can anticipate to hear back 2 to 4 weeks later. You send an email to a company in Taiwan, you hear back, just like in North America, you hear back within 24 hours. So these are, and I've worked with plenty of German companies, so I know. And these are some, big. We just had one issue between a German and Taiwan company. The Taiwan company was like, "Wow, they're not responding to us. They're not interested." But no, they were on vacation in Germany, right? They have 6 weeks vacation every year, and then lots of sick days, and so on. And those things can just derail business partnerships, right? People just don't understand. Oh, they're not getting back to my email. It took them 3 weeks to respond to my email. The Germans, and then the Taiwan side thinks they're not interested any longer, and so on and so forth. So lots of little roadblocks. And what's the solution? Very simple. If you're a Taiwanese company, you want to do business in the US, hire an American. If you're a Taiwanese company, you want to do business in Germany, hire a German, not Taiwanese in Germany. If you're an American and you want to do business in Taiwan, hire Taiwanese people. Go there yourself, but don't run the company yourself. And really, Mosaic took off after Johnny, who is working with me now since 2022, came on board. He's about my age and very respected and established in Taiwan, and that really helped a lot, right? So you must have, in many countries, you must have a local co-founder, especially in a service-related business, right? If it's a hardcore tech product that you just have to make, right, you can probably get by without having a senior level local. But if it's more on the service side, you must have locals, otherwise no chance.
That's really helpful to know. I know at the events that I run, the tech networking events that I run in New York City, there's always people coming from different countries, whether it's Europe or maybe maybe somewhere in Asia. Usually, I've seen they're coming themselves as sort of the liaison, but I don't know that they're hiring teams of U.S. citizens. So that's some knowledge that I'll pass on to them. That it's incredibly beneficial to have someone from that culture be the one running things and hire people from that culture.
I can tell you why they don't. It's money, right? Salaries in Taiwan are 1/3 or 1/4 of New York and San Francisco. 1/3 for sure, wow. 1/4 in some cases. So when they hear that a salesperson, like a senior salesperson, gets a $200,000 base salary, it just outright. They're not, and so they hire a Taiwan intern. With all respect, I've seen it happen many times. That gets out of college that they know from Taiwan, that went to school in the US, and then that becomes the senior business development person. It's gotten better, but that was especially 2013, 14 when I started in Taiwan. I saw that. I came back to San Francisco, and I saw this happen a lot. It's gotten a lot better, right? And of course, there are also very, very knowledgeable Taiwanese people living in America that can do the job, that are Taiwan American people. That works very well, obviously.
I see.
But I'm talking about a small startup, right, that doesn't want to hire either the Taiwanese Americans that are also expensive here. They charge U.S. salary, not Taiwan salary. So salary is the problem, Brent. That's why you don't see these go-to-market teams being localized, and they try to wing it. Many startups when they come to the U.S. and get by, or even worse, sent by some government program for 2 weeks or 3 weeks into plug and play or something like that, and then go back home and didn't get much done. Launching in another country requires local commitment, and that means setting up a local company. The founders need to spend time in the country and hire local people, and flyby in and out, trying to come to TechCrunch Disrupt and raise money and go back home. Doesn't work for most unless they have a lot of attention in their country already, and it's highly differentiated. But that is not the case for 99% of startups, right? So
sure. Yeah, so is there a solution there then? So if say you don't have the money, you're a startup, you can't afford to hire local. I mean, what do you do in that case? Do you have to just find a way to raise the money?
Well, I think you should have success in your own country first versus just
Okay,
like, oh, we're going to America. It sounds great, right? So make some money at home first and then come to America.
I see.
And product marketing fit needs to be localized, right? Make sure that you understand, and that's what most international startups I see are failing when they come from other countries. They just look at their own country, maybe even if it's Asia or Europe. Oh, there's no competitor in Europe, so let's go to America. But why don't you just actually understand who are your top tier, top two customers in America, in New York, and why would they want to buy my product versus the local US competitors? And who are they, right? So you identify 2 or 3 big customers that you want to engage with. Look at who are they buying from, right? Who are my competitors? And then what do I do better, right? It's that simple. And when you have that figured out, you have a market, right? And then you can go to plug and play for 3 months and play around and then get serious and hire people and stay and raise money, right? But just flying back and forth, what I see happens so much. It's a nice trip, good picture opportunity, and it's great to exchange the business card and LinkedIn profiles, but it often does not go much further.
Yeah, great advice, Volker. And usually, actually, my last question is, do you have any advice for someone starting, in this case, a VC firm in a foreign country? Of course, you just gave a lot of it, but is there anything else that you'd like to leave to a listener that might be thinking of following your path?
Never give up, right? You need
Never
a
give up.
lot of time. As I mentioned, I started Yushan Ventures in 2011, and it had the Ventures name. And since 2011, I've been getting applications from US, from all over the world, from Nepal, from all over the world, from young people that are aspiring VCs and
Uh-huh.
want to break into the VC industry and look for an internship. So there is no silver bullet, right, to become a VC. It typically helps if you A, have access to tremendous deal flow that's differentiated, and B, have access to capital, meaning your LPs, right? If either one of those are not in place and you never work for a VC firm, you probably should not become a VC, right? So you need to have those both actually. And if it's not a single founder fund, if it's what's usually the case, another 1 or 2 partners, right? One partner brings the deal flow and the next partner brings the money. But it's better if all partners, by the way, raise money. I've seen a lot of VCs trying to raise money, a lot of them, they have 2 or 3 people on the team, and then the hard, heavy lifting of raising the LP money sits on 1 or 2 of their shoulders, rests on 1 or 2 of their shoulders, and the third person is like, oh, I'm the engineer, I don't have to deal with this. So every co-founder in a VC fund should actually raise money because that's the bread and butter
Right.
in a VC
Sure.
firm.
And sorry, just to follow up on that, what is the best way to raise money? Is there a clear cut way, or is it you just have to try varied things until you find something that works?
Well, if you're really good, if you're a serial entrepreneur and you're obviously already skin in the game, you have some money if you had an exit, and then your existing VCs and their investors, they probably heard of you. And then once they see you on TechCrunch, you're raising a fund, or see it on social media, they'll approach you. So like a certain level of fame does help in that
I
sense,
see. Yeah.
right? To be known. And the other element is just hustling, right? But again, when you approach LPs, what's your investment thesis? Why is it different from the other 10,000 VCs that are trying to raise money, right? I mean, everywhere in the world. I remember during the during the real estate build up in San Francisco, 2007, 2006, everybody was a realtor. And now everybody is like raising an angel fund or, right, raising a seed fund or, right. So many people in the industry are raising funds around the world. So you're not alone if you raise a fund, and you better, as I said, have these 2 core elements. You have access to capital already, being able to deploy at least 1% for the fund size of your own capital, right? Skin in the game. And then have really compelling deal flow and a differentiated investment thesis, which is not easy these days because so many people are raising money. So yeah, it's a numbers game, and trial and error. And some people get there and most won't. It's not easy.
Right. Yeah. Well, everything in the startup world, it's not easy, and it takes a lot of persistence. So it's But yeah, thanks, Volker, so much for taking the time to talk. It's been fascinating. As someone
Thank
like
you.
myself that organizes events, I've thought about, I see all these startup ideas. What would it take to start a VC firm? And it turns out I have some venture or some startup flow here, but I need to find the capital. So that's the next thing I have to figure out.
Yeah.
That's a big part, right?
Not easy. Not easy.
Yeah, no, not easy at all. But yeah, I look forward to watching your investments, your ventures that you're starting,
Thank you, man.
and look forward to staying in touch.
Welcome to Taiwan. Bye-bye.
Thank you.